Okay, this will be a description of a couple of new tools the QuickDraw version 5.4 has added. Now, this is a relatively complex profile draft. And if I select that guy, so I've got a library tool here, and that's similar to the profile draft, the profile substitution tool, and it'll walk through the substitution of each one of the blocks for those profiles. So once I select that pattern, if I hit the library, I'm going to need to zoom out. What it's actually done is taken that profile draft, and as I cycle through those, you'll notice the message up here. I can cycle through the library. There's a 3-thread huck. So it's going to show me that whole pattern. If it'll fit on the grid, it will show it to me. And since the a crackle doesn't fit, it's a large pattern. As much as it will show those, if they fit on the grid, it will show those so I can cycle through them. Which is essentially what the profile does in a thumbnail. Just these are a little bit more of the whole profile since I got more screen to stay with. So that's what essentially the library button does. Okay, let me walk through the Explore tool in some detail. Since it's got a lot of capability, it's kind of a strange tool. I'm not sure it has any equivalency in the real world. It's probably closer to name drafting than anything else, in that it allows you to select a profile. So I've got a general outline, and then it allows me to play with the choices on the threading substitutions. So the first thing, if I look at the mouse over on these guys, doesn't really say much. If you'll go over the question mark, if you click the question mark, it basically tells you how to start the tool. So there's two things it needs to have. It needs to have a structure, which is defined by creating something into the copy A block, which would be the background blocks. And then it will generate patterns for the B blocks based on the descriptions, and then do the block substitution so you can see what the new pattern would look like. So let me start out with an example. Draw line tool, and it will work on any tool between 3x3 and 8x8. For the 3x3s, there's really just two choices. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but let me just walk through something. So there is a 6x6, and I want kind of an asymmetric little arrow there. So if I select that and follow the instructions, copy that to the block A, I'm going to turn that off, and when I hit the Explorer button, let's see, the next thing I need to do is select. When I select the profile I want to substitute, so I've now got the two parameters I want to work with. When I hit the Explorer button, I can barely see what's going on because it's gotten a lot larger. But what I can see here is I can see the A blocks and the B blocks. Now, the Explorer function here, the arrow next to it controls the B block substitution. If you'll notice the message in the mouse over message box here, when I move forward, it's telling me, the block B is, a toggle in reverse. So what it's going to do from the A block on the background, it's going to do the reverse, invert, toggle, and turn. So as I hit those options, you'll see in the B blocks that that's actually reversed. One more, and the alternate is the toggle, so you get high contrast. So you can step it around and see exactly what the different B block substitutions are. So you can fill whatever you want into the A block. It will automatically generate those Bs. So there's actually 16 substitution choices that it will run through there until it runs out. And then, so you've got that flexibility of how you want to do the block substitutions. Now, that's fine for structures that you've defined in advance. Now, the other thing this is also quite capable of doing is if I hit the lower row here, controls the random generation of structures into those copy A and blocks. The XA is an Explorer A. If I hit that, it's actually going to randomly generate a pattern that is structurally sound, in that there will be one warp in each one of the rows and columns, so that I have at least I have one tie all the way across the pattern. Now that on a 6x6 pattern, that could potentially give me 10 thread floats, because it could be running between one pattern and the next. So I've now generated what ends up looking like a satin here, and as I cycle through it, I can see how those patterns randomly generate. So the XA would generate random patterns into the copy A, and then I can cycle through that. I can also just generate independent random patterns into the block Bs, if that's what you want to do. Most of the time I'd actually stay with maybe the contrasting here or whichever. Now the other boxes here control how random is random. The first single line would determine a single point in each row and column. So for a 6x6 matrix, there's 6 points in each one of those substitution squares. By increasing those guys, and I hit the Explorer, it's now generated more points, and the X would go to about 50% on the A's, so the patterns are darker. And since I'm looking at the high and lows, the contrast between the background and the pattern blocks is not as much. And then the third pound sign here goes to totally randoms, so that these guys are not weighted at all, but again, everything will be structurally sound, and it will be telling me the float counts as it looks through those. Now, the other box that's down here on the bottom is the backup. Now, what I found is when you're dealing with random numbers, it's pretty easy to just start. Let me go back to a single click. It's pretty easy to cycle through it and then decide, oops, I like that last one. Let me go back. So the back arrow basically heaps the stack. I think it's about 10 of the most recent substitution options. So I can then back through that. So that gives me an ability of generating and randomly look at what it is, what structural options, how does that look? It's structurally sound. Now, is it visually appealing? I can handle the structure, and this gives you a tool to quickly look and decide whether a structure is visually appealing as you look at the profile you wanted to see that in. So that kind of gives us a quick walkthrough of the Explorer functions. Let me look at one more thing real quick. If I turn it off. So this was actually where I started. For example, if I go back and just look at the 3x3, it's an interesting subset case. Again, select the whole pattern. When I explore it, it gives me, I suddenly start to find as I cycle through it, there's really only two patterns that work. There's a left going line. Now this does get interesting, it does give me the kind of a maze effect, but it does it in a lot smaller number of shafts. But as I look at random choices, they are all different, but there's really only two patterns. It's either the straight lines left or straight lines right, and then it kind of does the same thing, just offset by one. So when you're running 3x3 patterns, there's really only two choices. 4x4, there are literally thousands, and as you go into 6x6, 8x8, the number is closer to the number of grains of sand on a beach. It is a very large number of possible structures. So that gives me that walkthrough. Thank you.